When you run multiple flats in a building, the little things become loud. A dripping tap at 2 in the morning will become your alarm. A persistent squeak will start to feel like a scream. So when a dozen tenants pinged the building WhatsApp in the same week about a rotting smell coming from the bin area, I listened. The messages were curt at first, one text with a photo, another with the words, "This is disgusting." Then the voice notes arrived, shaky and adamant. I walked down that afternoon and the smell hit me on the stairs. Warm, sour, wet, the kind of smell that burrows behind your nose and settles there. Flies circled lazily and deliberately around the communal bin. One hovered for a full minute, like it was deciding whether to move in. From the third-floor balcony, I could see a young man, Jordan. He'd moved into 304 a month earlier, standing with a series of sealed buckets and odd sacks. He looked like someone who read the right blogs. Hemp shirt, prideful grin, a composting video bookmarked in his mind. He raised a bucket and dumped its contents into the dumpster like he was feeding some ritual. I asked a next-door neighbor who said they'd seen Jordan tending worm farms on his balcony at dusk. Real eco-warrior stuff, the neighbor had joked. 2 weeks later, the same neighbor was texting me photos of maggots crawling out from under the bin lid. What really got me wasn't the stench, it was the timing. Jordan had messaged the building group the night before, complaining about building hygiene and suggesting we arrange a professional deep clean as soon as possible. He framed it like a civic concern, formal and righteous. The hypocrisy stung. The man was standing ankle-deep in the problem, yet playing the outraged citizen. I took a photo of the dumpster, noted the odor levels in my phone, and sent a quiet message to myself. Document everything. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't act on emotion. I would act like a property manager, methodical, calm, and ultimately damning with evidence. I had a suspicion that what smelled rotten in the building wasn't just banana peels, it was a setup. I had a feeling the eco-hero had built himself a moral shield and was using it. I didn't know yet how deep that shield was, but I knew I'd find out. That evening, Jordan posted a long message to the group chat about building negligence and attached a photo of the exact dumpster lid I'd photographed earlier. Jordan's persona was unlike the other tenants. He had opinions about everything: energy-efficient bulbs, zero-waste lunchboxes, support local for coffee pods. He was generous with quotes about community gardens and fairly specific about how composting could save the city. When he signed the lease, he'd ask questions that sounded rehearsed, not curious, just rehearsed. Are balcony gardens permitted? Are there rules on worm farms? I answered honestly. The building encourages small, contained plants, but flat-scale composting on balconies in multi-story buildings is a no-no because of smell and vermin risk. I emailed him the building rules, and he replied, "Understood. I'll stick to worm bins and sealed systems." He even thanked me for being reasonable. That understanding lasted roughly 3 weeks. His balcony turned into a cluster of plastic drums wrapped in mesh. He had jars of strange-looking liquid, and an older man once drove up and dropped off what looked suspiciously like restaurant grease. He told me stories. I volunteer at a community kitchen. I get spent coffee grounds from 2 cafes. The twine of his story was persuasive, and most of the time I wanted to believe him. But then the little contradictions showed. The same morning a tenant had said they'd seen cardboard and whole salads in the dumpster. That isn't something a garden produces. I started to keep a quiet log. I photographed his balcony only as much as a landlord legally should observe, and I saved the group chat messages where he was the loudest. I also talked to our cleaner, a pragmatic woman named Helene who'd worked the building for years. If someone's composting on a balcony, it should be in a sealed tumbler and never be dumped in the bin. "This is rotten," she said. She told me she'd been scooping at the bin for a week, wearing gloves and gagging. That was the moment that empathy turned into responsibility. Some tenants are messy by neglect, others weaponize mess. Now I needed proof. That evening, Jordan emailed the entire building, calling our sanitation arrangements obsolete, and attached a petition link for a municipal cleanup. He signed off with the words, "We deserve better." Whatever else he was practiced in public outrage. The oddest part, he called me by name and framed me as the obstacle, as if I, the building manager, had allowed the dumpster to become an open sewer. The audience had shifted. He had framed the narrative. My job was to take back the narrative, one document at a time. Late that night, I noticed a white van pull up and two people walk across the courtyard with a sack that looked exactly like the ones he used. The word maggot rarely appears in property management memos. When it does, people panic. Helene called me at 7 on a Sunday morning, voice tight. You need to come down. There are maggots in the bin, and the kids downstairs saw one crawling toward the play area. I was out the door faster than I'd like to admit. I pictured white balloons of insect larvae and thought about the pregnant tenant 2 floors down. The first thing I did was secure the area, blocked the bin, asked tenants to keep doors closed, and called a licensed pest controller. The second thing I did was keep my arms steady. The pest controller arrived with an industrial mask and a calm that did nothing to calm me. He opened the bin and we both inhaled. That's active decomposition, he said. This has been going on for days. He took samples, labeled them, and swore me to the boring forensic language of sanitation, temperature, moisture, carbohydrate content. Then he handed me a regulatory form. Look, I'll issue a cleanup invoice, recommend weekly washouts for the rest of the month, and we'll do baiting for flies. The initial price tag not astronomical, but a meaningful sum landed like a stone. Jordan filmed parts of the cleanup on his phone and sent a plaintive video to the building chat. Look at this mess. I've had headaches. I watched his post with a strange mix of fulfillment and irritation. He narrated the event with a righteous tilt, but he had been in the frame more than once that week. He'd come by with buckets for the garden. He'd moved things near the dumpster. The more I looked, the more his involvement kept looping back to the incident we were cleaning. I asked the pest controller if he could test the samples to determine origin. He agreed, but warned that testing takes time. I booked a private waste inspector for independent analysis because sometimes you need a paper trail no one can spin away. While the bureaucracy churned, the building's morale sagged. Residents texted, "Are we safe?" and "Are you handling it?" I responded to each message with the same sentence. We're doing everything we can and documenting everything. The inspector's preliminary call at 3 p.m. said bluntly, the residue traces are highly suggestive of balcony composting, the same mix you'd expect from a worm farm and cafe grounds. The waste inspector arrived with the precision of someone who'd made a career out of being unimpressed by basic human negligence. Ben was small, quick-eyed, with a kind of voice that suggested he'd seen worse, and he had. We walked the bin area together while he took swabs and bagged them in sterile, ridiculous-looking sleeves. He asked questions I hadn't thought to ask. How often is the bin emptied? Are there cameras? Who was on the cleaning rota? I answered as best I could. When he returned the lab analysis a week later, the results read like a slow-burning reveal. The organic residue matched samples swabbed from the floor of Jordan's balcony. There were unique markers, a certain compost brand of biodegradable bags, a specific ratio of coffee grounds to citrus peel, and even traces of restaurant-grade fryer oil that Ben thought likely came from a cafe drop-off. The lab certificate came back stamped with codes and Latin names. In plain English, it said, "This slop came from Unit 304 within reasonable certainty." In business, evidence is a kind of currency. The lab report gave me currency I could spend. I framed the report with the photos Helene had taken, the pest controller invoice, the building WhatsApp transcripts, and the bin camera stills. When I laid the documents on my desk, they looked less like proof and more like a case. It was the kind of stack you hand to an insurance company and expect action, but I wanted more than municipal paperwork. I wanted social clarity. Residents had been fed up. They wanted to see the truth. I wanted them to know I hadn't ignored their complaints. That night, I drafted the meeting email. A tenants' assembly, calm in tone, mandatory in attendance. I'd planned for awkwardness and confrontation. I included the lab certificate as an attachment with professional words. For the building's safety and hygiene, we will review evidence and discuss remediation. I didn't CC Jordan on purpose. I wanted him to show up. I wanted him to present his compost justification in front of his community. The meeting invitation pinged across every tenant's phone. Jordan reacted immediately, an outrage-filled voice note in which he accused me of spying and violating trust. I called it the sniff test summit in the invite, because if you can't have a little theatricality, what's the point? The courtyard filled with residents who had been pest-weary, and the air was electric with complaint and curiosity. I started with the facts: invoices, lab reports, and the pest control company's recommendations. For transparency, I played off the heat of drama with the coolness of data. "We aren't pointing fingers," I told them. "We are showing process." Then I played the footage from the communal camera legal and within the building's policy shot near the dumpster. The playback was blunt and damning. A figure in a hemp shirt approaching the bin at night, buckets underarm, dumping gray-brown sludge and shoving sacks into the mouth of the container. I paused the frame and pointed out the timestamp. Someone gasped. Another resident muttered, "That's Jordan." He stood at the back with his arms folded, eyes darting. He did not storm out. The next phase was a performance of accountability. I asked for reactions. People were livid, telling of children playing by the bin, of arthropods arcing into their balconies the night before. Some demanded I press charges. Others asked, "Can you make him clean?" I told them I'd proposed remediation to Jordan, and that the pest control bill would be charged to him if he refused. As expected, he protested. He claimed the footage didn't prove origin, insisted his composting was sealed, and accused me of climate hostility. The odds shifted when Ben the waste inspector stood up and explained the lab result in simple terms. He matched the chrome of Jordan's balcony spade to the composition found in the bin. He explained that some compost smelled normal in an enclosed tumbler, but when spilled in bulk it ferments, attracts flies, and generates maggots. The crowd started to lean into the evidence. Jordan's voice reduced to background static. After the meeting, a message boiled in our WhatsApp. "Do we want to post this on the group? Let the neighbors know?" I hesitated, then tapped send. Jordan confronted me the next morning outside my office like someone used to being immune to consequence. "You humiliated me," he said, voice tight as a violin string. I stood at my window, watching him fumble with his keys, and felt the air of the building change from plagued to observant. He accused me of weaponizing footage. I offered him the lease clause that addressed communal space and waste disposal and showed him the signed agreement with his initials. He flipped through it like it was a prop and then said, "This is petty. You could have talked to me." I told him I had tried. I had conversed politely, collected messages, and scheduled remediation. He countered with guilt. "I'm trying to live sustainably, and you're punishing me for being green." There was a performative sadness in his tone, as if the victim mask had been pressed to his face like a second skin. But he'd been carrying full sacks to the dumpster at midnight and emptying kitchen waste in grotesque quantities. I explained the consequences. We could invoice him for pest control and cleaning. We could issue a formal breach notice that would affect his rental history, and we would escalate if he refused to resolve matters. He demanded privacy many ways, talking about being targeted, but legal boundaries are not optional when public health is involved. I left him with one offer: sign an agreement to pay the cleanup and attend a mandatory community waste handling workshop, or I begin formal proceedings. He tore the paper in his hands. Behind the anger I saw fear. He knew the documents could be used to mark his rental record in an era when tenant histories move like dossier breadcrumbs from owner to owner. Fear turned his bravado brittle. He stormed out, but the building watched. Word travels fast among renters. The next day, a message arrived. A neighbor texted a photo of Jordan's balcony buckets gone covered now in tarp, but not removed. That signaled either an attempt to hide or to regroup. Either way, the battle lines were now visible. That night, someone sent me a video. Jordan carrying 2 sealed buckets across the car park heading, it seemed, to the dumpster again. The paperwork arrived on his door at 10 a.m. Simple and bureaucratic. An itemized invoice, including pest control, deep clean, and the cost of a temporary bin lock to ensure no future midnight dumping. I formatted it as a professional demand, with dates, times, and line items, and I attached the lab report and camera stills as appendices. The number looked heavy: $847. The price was a statement, not vindictive but precise. I'd negotiated with the pest firm to keep it reasonable but meaningful. His first reaction was to scoff with entitlement. Tenants who behave like activists but act like amateurs rarely fare well when grassroots meets ledger. He posted a story on social media about being targeted for trying to save the planet. Some 20-somethings liked the post, But in the building, my tenants were reading my evidence and replying with a decidedly cooler tone. "We're done with the smell. Pay the bill, Jordan. We're not funding your experiment." It was communal pressure distinct from the legal one. In my experience, peer pressure moves mountains, paper moves courtrooms. Combined, they are lethal. A week passed. He paid a portion under duress and promised to attend the workshop I offered. He showed up late, glancing at the facilitator and fidgeting as the lecture went into the science of decomposition. There were moments where his eyes flicked to the exit, to the camera, to the people in the room who'd once applauded his green posts. The cognitive dissonance was visible. The man who had once styled himself as a champion of responsible living felt exposed as both irresponsible and performative. 2 days later, an anonymous message landed in my inbox. "He's cleaning, but we saw him leave a bucket behind the wheelie room." I checked my camera, and the footage made my stomach tighten. Part of being an effective property manager, I've learned, is offering a way back. Humans have complicated natures. Sometimes they genuinely want to change. After Jordan paid the first installment, I offered a compromise: help fund a communal compost tumbler and attend the proper training. In return, the building would forgive part of the penalty. It was generous and practical. The community would get an organized system, and we'd absolve part of the cost, turning a problem into an improvement. Jordan accepted publicly, but flinched privately. He attended the workshop on litter, odor control, and municipal guidelines, the facilitator being the same Ben who ran our forensics. Ben handled the instruction with an even hand. He explained that urban composting is possible, but only under strict conditions. "Sealed tumbler," he said. "No oily waste, no restaurant offal, and regular maintenance." Jordan nodded, scribbling notes like a student. He asked questions that sounded less rhetorical and more sincere. For a week, he made changes. He purchased a certified tumbler, he bagged leftovers, he showed up with his lists. For a moment, it looked like redemption. The communal WhatsApp softened. One tenant even sent a thumbs up. My own satisfaction that the situation could be salvaged felt real. I allowed the narrative to swing toward rehabilitation. But then, on a Tuesday evening, I noticed a smell again. Not as intense, but there. Helen found a torn biodegradable bag in the weeded corner behind the bin. My stomach tightened, because patterns are rarely one-off events. Patterns repeat. People recycle the same mistakes because it's easier than confronting behavior that costs them convenience. I walked to Jordan's door and knocked. Inside, Jordan wasn't the frantic man from the meeting. He looked tired and resolute. He opened the door holding a bucket, and behind him, the aroma leaked out like an accusation. By then, I'd turned the dossier into a short documentary, deliberately dry and factual. It was not a smear piece. It was a public service clip about proper composting, with before and after footage, lab results, and the actual clip of Jordan dumping. I uploaded it to our building portal and posted a synopsis in the local landlord's forum, where it went semi-viral among peers who loved a case study in management. The reaction was swift and satisfying. Practically every landlord who messaged me called it textbook. To wait, but satisfaction only matters when you consider consequences. Jordan moved out a month later. He left 3 sealed buckets on his balcony. That smell of half-effort repentance that never matures into change. I booked a final cleanup, removed the abandoned buckets, and arranged a final invoice in accordance with the lease. The building cleared out in a way that felt tangible. Plants seemed greener. The courtyard smelled faintly of lemon-scented detergent instead of rot. Sometimes, the best revenge is administrative. Careful documentation, measured action, and public clarity. The community regained faith in the process. Tenants, who had debated moving, stayed. New applications came in faster. The moral was quietly demonstrated. Virtue signaling means little when it's not matched by care. Weeks later, I ran into Jordan in the market. He gave me a quick, almost apologetic nod. His hands were empty. His past online posts had disappeared. Time has a leveling effect. In the months after, the building returned to its ordinary rhythms: washing lines, the smell of toast in the morning, the low rumble of tram traffic. I rented 304 to a young couple who brought succulents and an actual sealed tumbler purchased from a reputable supplier. They followed the rules, followed my care notes, and the bin area resumed being utilitarian instead of theatrical. I've thought about Jordan a lot, about how easy it is to wear righteousness as a costume, how people weaponize moral language to deflect accountability, and how the community will usually tell the truth if given a fair hearing. The victory here wasn't mine alone. It was a collective correction. The residents told the story in the stairwell for weeks. The eco-warrior turned cautionary tale, and I watched them laugh, exchange the details, and feel safer in their building. In the end, I learned that patience is a form of power. Documentation is a way to keep anger from becoming vengeance. The law is a tool to translate moral outrage into practical outcomes. I also learned never to underestimate what a bucket of coffee grounds and a bit of rot can reveal about a person's priorities. When I walk past the bin area now and smell nothing but lemon and rain, I think of justice not as dramatic, but as exact. It arrives in small, clean increments. Invoices paid, lessons learned, a building that breathes freely. That's the payoff, not spectacle, but restoration. Sometimes revenge is a composted lesson, earthy, unpleasant, but ultimately fertilizing the ground for something better. People say compost turns trash into soil. In my case, the rot turned into accountability.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one on the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.